The man had returned Lady Peverell's purse before she called him a thief. The accusation cracked across the posting yard of the Bell and Crown just as a coach wheel struck a rut and sent muddy water toward Lydia Peverell's skirts. The stranger moved before anyone else did. He stepped between her and the splash, turning the torn breadth of his brown coat into a shield. Mud darkened the cloth from shoulder to hem. Lydia remained untouched. For one suspended moment, the entire yard seemed to stare at the man who had protected a lady, while dressed like someone no lady was expected to see. It was Sunday, the 3rd of May, 1818, and Lady Peverell had ordered the carriage. Stopped in Brackenhurst only long enough to change horses on the road to Tunbridge Wells. Sir Horace Darrowby was waiting beside the inn steps, polished boots planted wide, his gloved hand resting on the silver head of his cane. He had arranged an engagement supper for that evening. Lydia had learned of it only when her mother informed her which gown she would wear. The stranger had come running after their carriage with a red morocco purse held high above the mud. "Stop that man," Lady Peverell cried. "He's stolen my purse." 2 ostlers froze. The innkeeper emerged from beneath the arch. The stranger stopped of his own accord. Rain clung to his dark hair, and fatigue had hollowed the skin beneath his eyes. Yet his posture was too straight for a vagrant's. "I believe this belongs to you," he said. His voice was low and controlled. It fell beneath the carriage step. Lady Peverell snatched the purse without thanking him. She opened it and counted the banknotes, then the coins, then the small pearl clasp wrapped in tissue. Nothing was missing. Lydia watched the truth settle over her mother's face and fail to alter it. "A clever thief returns what he can't safely carry," Lady Peverell said. "You followed our carriage. That alone proves your intention. It proves that I wished to return your property. You expect a reward. I expect you to say that the purse is intact." Sir Horace gave a short laugh. "You're in no position to expect anything." He caught the stranger by the front of his coat and thrust him back against one of the yard posts. The movement was swift rather than brutal, but the wood struck his shoulder with a blunt sound. A plain horn button snapped from the coat and spun across the stones. Lydia moved before her mother could stop her. She bent, caught the button before a carriage wheel crushed it, and rose with mud dampening the edge of one glove. "Sir Horace, release him." Horace turned his head slowly. "You needn't concern yourself with gutter insolence, Lydia. My concern is that my mother's purse was returned untouched, and you have answered honesty with humiliation." The stranger's gaze met hers. His eyes were grey, steady, and disconcertingly attentive. He did not look grateful. He looked as though he were measuring whether she would remain brave once the yard remembered to judge her. Horace let go, more because people were watching than because Lydia had asked. The stranger straightened his coat without haste. A coach rattled beneath the arch. Mud sprayed from the horse's hooves. Again he shifted toward Lydia, drawing the ragged side of his coat across her path. The gesture was quiet and entirely unnecessary now. It moved her more than gratitude would have done. She held out the horn button. Their fingertips touched. His hand was cold, his knuckles reddened by weather, but he did not close his fingers over hers. "Keep it," he said. "The coat can't be mended in the yard. Then I'll return it when it can." Something almost like humor warmed his eyes. "That sounds dangerously like a promise." "Lydia." Her mother's voice could have chilled boiling water. Lady Peverell descended from the carriage with the purse pressed to her bosom. "You'll step away from that man." "Sir Horace has been patient beyond reason. And you won't shame him before the county. I haven't made any promise to Sir Horace. Your promise isn't required. The arrangements are settled. Horace lifted his chin. By the end of the month, you'll be Lady Darrowby. This display will soon be forgotten. The words were spoken loudly enough for the innkeeper, the ostlers, the waiting passengers, and the postboy above the stable door to hear. Lydia felt the old pressure close around her. For years, her mother had turned decisions into completed facts before Lydia could object. A visit became a courtship. A debt became a duty. Silence became consent. The stranger looked at Lydia, not at Horace. He did not offer rescue. He waited. That restraint opened a space no one else had ever allowed her. No, Lydia said. Lady Peverell went still. Horace's expression hardened. Lydia's pulse beat against her throat, but her voice did not break. I won't marry Sir Horace. I'd sooner marry the man you've called a beggar than become the wife of a gentleman who announces my consent as though I were livestock entered in his account book. A stable lad dropped a buckle. The small clang sounded immense. Sir Horace stared at her. Lady Peverell's face emptied of colour. The stranger's attention did not leave Lydia's. Don't choose me merely to wound them, he said. Anger is a poor foundation for a marriage. Lydia closed her fingers around the horn button. Then give me a choice they can't take back. You don't know me. I know you returned what wasn't yours. I know you asked truth instead of money. I know you stood between me and the mud before you knew whether I'd defend you. Those aren't the same as knowing a man. No, but they're more than I've been permitted to know of the man selected for me. Lady Peverell seized Lydia's wrist, but Lydia withdrew before the grip could settle. This nonsense ends now. The stranger stepped forward, placing himself close enough to prevent Horace from reaching Lydia again. Yet he kept his hands at his sides. The lady has said no. Horace's lip curled. And who are you to repeat her? The hostler near the arch stared at the stranger, recognition flickering across his face. Sir, I thought you were. The stranger silenced him with one glance. Then he turned back to Lydia. A black enamel ring circled the little finger of his left hand. Its workmanship was too fine for the rest of him, the narrow gold edge almost hidden beneath rain and soot. My name is Stephen Stanhope, he said. Mr. Stephen Stanhope, as far as this yard is concerned. I won't take advantage of a declaration made under pressure. If you still wish it tomorrow morning, I'll call upon you with a proper proposal of courtship. Until then, you're free to withdraw every word. Lydia had expected triumph, perhaps amusement. Instead, he offered her an escape from him as carefully as he had offered escape from Horace. I won't withdraw. You may feel differently when the yard is quiet. Then come tomorrow and hear my answer when it is. Lady Peverell drew herself upright. You won't be admitted to Peverell House. Then Miss Peverell may refuse me at the gate, Stephen replied. But the refusal will be hers. He bowed to Lydia, not deeply enough to mock himself and not familiarly enough to insult her. As he turned away, his thumb moved over the black enamel ring. Lydia saw grief tighten his mouth before his expression closed again. I've been searching for someone, he said. Marriage may bring her out of hiding. He crossed the yard beneath the rain, leaving Lydia with the horn button in her palm and a promise that felt less like rescue than the first unlocked door of her life. By 9 the next morning, Lady Peverell had turned the morning room into a prison without locking a single door. Lydia sat beside the unlit hearth with yesterday's plain horn button hidden in her reticule, while her mother occupied the sofa between her and the bell pull. The breakfast tray stood untouched on a small table. Tea cooled beneath its silver cover. Toast hardened at the edges. Lady Peverell had spent the first hour reading aloud every consequence Lydia had supposedly invited upon them, from cancelled morning calls to public ridicule, as though shame were an illness that could be cured by repetition. "Mrs. Treadwell has already sent her card back," she said. "Lady Ashcombe has postponed Thursday's visit. By noon, every respectable house in Kent will know my daughter offered herself to a beggar in a posting yard." "I did not offer myself," Lydia replied. "I refused Sir Horace. You humiliated him. He announced a marriage I had never accepted." Lady Peverell lowered the card in her hand. Acceptance was understood. By whom? By everyone whose opinion matters. Lydia looked at the breakfast tray. Hunger had begun to ache beneath her ribs, but she knew her mother was watching for weakness. Lady Peverell had always treated appetite as evidence of moral failure. A daughter who ate after causing distress was unfeeling. A daughter who did not eat was unstable. Either judgment could be used. The door opened, and Sir Horace entered without waiting to be announced. He carried a narrow velvet case. His morning coat was immaculate, though the satisfaction in his face made him appear less polished than he had the day before. "I've come to settle this unpleasantness," he said. Lydia remained seated. "You have come without being invited. Your mother invited me. Then you have come to see her." His mouth tightened. Lady Peverell rose. "Lydia, enough. Sir Horace has shown extraordinary generosity." She moved to the writing table and placed one hand upon a folded paper. Peverell House was in immediate difficulty. Certain creditors would not wait. Sir Horace advanced the necessary funds because he believed our families were about to be joined. Lydia stared at her. "You accepted money on the expectation that I would marry him. I protected your home. You wagered my consent." Sir Horace set the velvet case on the table and opened it. Inside lay a bracelet of heavy gold links, each one engraved with a small D. "Wear this at dinner tonight," he said. "Tell those who ask that yesterday's scene was the result of distress. I'll say no more of it. And if I do not, then your mother's advance becomes an ordinary debt." Lady Peverell's fingers pressed into the paper. "Do you understand what that means?" Lydia understood perfectly. It meant the roofs, the servants, the tenants who relied upon Peverell House, and the portrait gallery her mother worshipped as if paint ancestors could absolve the living. It also meant Sir Horace believed fear would make her grateful for the chain he offered. She closed the bracelet case. "I will not wear it." Horace leaned toward her. "You would sacrifice your family for a stranger in a torn coat." "No, I refuse to sacrifice myself to the man who arranged the danger." Silence struck the room. Lady Peverell's face hardened into something almost peaceful. "Then you will remain here until sense returns." The door was not locked. No servant had been ordered to guard it. Yet when Lydia rose, her mother said, "If you leave this room to meet him, do not expect my carriage, my money, or my protection." Lydia's hand settled over the reticule at her side. The horn button rested inside like a small, rough certainty. "I did not know those things were yours to withdraw from an adult woman." A knock sounded from the hall. Mrs. Dacre entered, her expression composed but her eyes alert. "Mr. Stephen Stanhope has called." Lady Peverell turned sharply. "He will not be admitted." "He anticipated that possibility," Mrs. Dacre said. "He has taken a private parlour at the Bell and Crown. He asks only that Miss Peverell be permitted to refuse him in person. With me present." Sir Horace laughed. The insolence. Lydia met Mrs. Dacre's gaze. Her former governess gave no encouragement, but she did not look away. That was enough. I shall go. Lady Peverell's voice fell low. Then go without my carriage. The inn is less than a mile. You will walk through the village after yesterday? Yes, and let them stare. Lydia opened the door. They stared while I obeyed you. I may as well give them something honest to see. The rain had stopped by the time Lydia and Mrs. Dacre reached the Bell and Crown. Stephen was waiting in an upstairs parlour overlooking the yard. His coat had been brushed, but it was still missing the horn button. He rose when Lydia entered, and a brief stiffness crossed his left shoulder before he concealed it. The bruise from Sir Horace's shove had not vanished overnight. He made no mention of it. Miss Peverell, he said. Mrs. Dacre. Lydia removed her gloves. You said I might withdraw. You may, and if I do, I'll tell anyone who asks that I misunderstood you. I won't permit yesterday's anger to become a weapon against you. You would accept the ridicule. It has found me before. His mouth moved in the faintest suggestion of dry humor, but his eyes remained serious. You are not obliged to marry me because you defended me, nor because you defended me. Precisely. A servant entered with tea, bread, and cold ham. Lydia's empty stomach tightened. Stephen noticed. He did not ask whether she had eaten. He did not offer her a plate in a way that would make refusal another performance. Instead, after the servant left, he crossed to the window and turned his back upon the room. The yard is remarkably educational this morning, he said. One postboy has attempted to saddle the same horse twice. Mrs. Dacre hid a small smile. Lydia understood. He was giving her privacy without calling attention to the need. She cut a slice of bread, then another. Only after she had eaten did Stephen turn back. The gesture was so ordinary that it reached somewhere her mother's grand apologies never had. I have questions, Lydia said. You should. Do you have a wife? No. A betrothed woman? No. Debts? None that would pass to you or threaten your comfort. That is not the same as having none. I owe no creditor. I have independent means. Yet you dress as you do. His gaze dropped briefly to the torn coat. I have not told you everything. Mrs. Dacre straightened. Lydia felt the first edge of alarm. What have you not told me? My family circumstances, my purpose in Brackenhurst. I will answer, but not falsely, and not all this morning. There is one matter you must know now. I am searching for a woman named Eliza Wren. She knew my elder brother before he died. Why are you searching for her? Because something was left unfinished. His thumb touched the black enamel ring on his little finger. Marriage may bring her out of hiding because news travels faster when scandal carries it. Lydia studied him. Was she your brother's wife? I do not believe so. That is not certainty. No. His honesty unsettled her more than a polished assurance might have done. If I continue, she said, there will be conditions. Name them. You will make no claim over my correspondence. Mrs. Dacre remains with me if she chooses, and you will make no decision that touches my reputation without consulting me first. Agreed. You answer quickly, because none of those requests is unreasonable. He moved to the writing desk, but did not sit. I have also asked a solicitor to prepare a settlement protecting whatever property or income belongs to you. Sir Horace's advance to your mother will not become a claim upon your marriage portion merely because he expected to marry you. Lydia's breath caught. How did you learn of the advance? Sir Horace spoke of it downstairs loudly enough for half the inn to hear. I asked no one to betray your confidence. And you can afford a solicitor. Yes, you truly are not a beggar. Something changed in his face, almost guilt. No, I am not. He took up a blank sheet. The banns may be called at St. Jude's on Sunday if you still intend to proceed. Before I write to the vicar, I will ask once more, do you wish to withdraw? Lydia thought of her mother's unguarded door, Sir Horace's bracelet, and Stephen facing the window so she could eat without judgment. No, she said, but I reserve the right to ask every question you would rather avoid. His eyes warmed. I believe that may be the first condition I fear. Mrs. Dacre looked at the black ring. Whom do you mourn, Mr. Stanhope? Stephen's hand stilled above the paper. The brother whose sins I inherited with his title. The word escaped before he could stop it. Lydia looked up. He corrected himself softly. With his name. Then he began the letter arranging the banns. The first ban was read on Sunday, the 10th of May, beneath a painted wooden ceiling that had heard births announced, deaths mourned, and marriages promised long before Lydia Peverell was born. Yet no declaration had ever seemed to make St. Jude's hold its breath, quite like the names of Miss Lydia Peverell and Mr. Stephen Stanhope. The vicar's voice remained calm. The congregation did not. A rustle moved through the pews like wind across dry leaves. Heads turned, fans paused. Someone behind Lady Peverell whispered too loudly. The man from the posting yard. Lydia kept her gaze upon the prayer book in her lap. Her mother had come dressed in black silk. Not because she was in mourning, but because she wished everyone to understand that she considered herself bereaved. Sir Horace Darrowby sat across the aisle with a paper folded in his hand and fury held tightly behind his teeth. Stephen stood 3 pews behind Lydia, beside Mrs. Dacre. His coat was still plain and carefully brushed. The missing horn button had been replaced by a mismatched one of dark wood. The original remained in Lydia's reticule. She could feel its small shape whenever her fingers tightened around the clasp. When the vicar asked whether any lawful impediment existed, Sir Horace rose. The movement pulled every eye toward him. I question whether the gentleman has made a full disclosure of his circumstances, he said. The vicar regarded him over his spectacles. That is not in itself a lawful impediment, Sir Horace. His residence in this parish is doubtful. Stephen answered before the vicar could. I have lodged at the Bell and Crown since the 12th of April. The innkeeper, seated near the rear, nodded reluctantly, but clearly. Horace unfolded his paper. He has no established occupation. Neither does half the landed gentry, Stephen said. A few restrained coughs concealed laughter. Lydia looked back despite herself. His expression remained grave, but dry amusement lingered at the corner of his mouth. Horace reddened. The vicar requested that he sit unless he possessed evidence of an existing marriage, consanguinity, or another lawful bar. He did not. The service continued, though no one listened with much devotion. Outside, the churchyard became a court of opinion. Lady Peverell left without waiting for Lydia, sweeping toward her carriage as if abandonment were a punishment best performed before witnesses. Mrs. Dacre remained beside Lydia. Stephen approached only after Lady Peverell's carriage had passed through the gate. You may still regret this, he said. You have asked me that every day. I intend to remain tiresomely consistent, then I shall remain tiresomely unchanged. They walked beneath the bare branches of the churchyard elms, Mrs. Dacre a respectful distance behind them. Lydia noticed the black enamel ring again. Rain had darkened its surface on the day they met, but in the weak spring light she could see a narrow gold edge and lettering concealed against his palm. Mrs. Dacre asked whom you mourn, she said. You did not answer fully. Stephen's gaze settled upon the gravestones ahead. My elder brother, Edward Stanhope. He died 3 years ago. And his sins? He gave her a brief look. You hear what others hope you will overlook. That is not an answer. No. He drew a slow breath. Edward loved a woman named Eliza Wren. She was an actress. My family considered the attachment disgraceful. They persuaded him to end it. Persuaded? That is the polite family word. What is the truthful one? They threatened him with disinheritance and threatened her with ruin. Lydia thought of her mother's morning room, the untouched breakfast, and Sir Horace's gold bracelet. Did he leave her? Yes. Did he regret it? I believe so. Belief again. Stephen's mouth tightened. Edward did not leave behind enough certainty. He touched the ring with his thumb. He promised to provide for her. After his death, I learned that the promise had not been fulfilled. Eliza disappeared before I could find her. And you think your marriage will bring her back? Scandal travels more faithfully than any paid messenger. Was she his wife? I do not believe they married, but you cannot prove they did not. Not yet. Lydia stopped beside a weathered stone. Angel, you understand why that answer troubles me. Yes, and you still let the bans proceed. Because I am not married, Lydia. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. The familiarity was quiet, almost accidental, yet it altered the space between them. Forgive me. I did not object. His eyes held hers for one measured moment. Then Mrs. Dacre cleared her throat gently behind them, and they resumed walking. The second ban was read on the 17th of May. Lady Peverell did not attend. Her empty pew attracted more attention than her presence would have done. After service, rain trapped Lydia, Stephen, and Mrs. Dacre beneath the church porch with a dozen other parishioners. Water fell in silver lines beyond the stone arch. Stephen stood close enough that Lydia could hear the soft friction of his glove against the walking stick he carried, but not so close as to crowd her. A covered rider waited across the lane beside a bay horse. The man wore no livery, Lydia recognized. He watched Stephen rather than the church door. When Stephen glanced toward him, the rider lowered his head and moved on. A friend? Lydia asked. A courier. For you? For my family? Your family appears to employ remarkably patient men. Patience is cheaper than intelligence. She looked at him. Was that humor? A regrettable lapse. I shall try not to repeat it. Her laugh escaped before she could stop it. Several heads turned. Stephen's expression softened, and for a moment neither family grief nor public scandal stood between them. A gust swept beneath the porch. Lydia's bonnet ribbon loosened and twisted around the clasp at her shoulder. Stephen lifted one hand, then stopped. May I? He asked. Lydia felt the attention in his question more keenly than she would have felt an uninvited touch. Yes. He drew the ribbon free with careful fingers. His knuckles brushed the edge of her bonnet, light and deliberate. The contact lasted only a moment. Still, Lydia became aware of the warmth beneath her skin and of the restraint with which he stepped back. There, he said, you have rescued me from public disorder. I would not claim so grand a service. No, you appear to dislike claiming anything. His gaze changed, but before he could answer, the rain eased. On their walk toward the village, Lydia asked where his family lived. Stephen pointed westward beyond the low hills. There is a property called Briarholt. Have you been there? Many times. You know the road well, every turn. Yet you called it family property, not home. His steps slowed. Home is not always the house one inherits. The word inherits struck Lydia with the memory of his mistake in the inn parlor. Title, name. He had corrected himself too quickly. She did not press him, though the unanswered question remained. The third ban was read on the 24th of May. By then the congregation had tired of pretending surprise. But Sir Horace had not tired of contempt. He confronted them at the churchyard gate, his cane planted across the path. 3 Sundays of spectacle do not make a gentleman, he said. You are still a nameless adventurer, Stanhope. Stephen's expression cooled. My name has been read aloud often enough for even you to remember it. Horace turned to Lydia. You will discover what it costs to attach yourself to a man without position. Lydia met his gaze. A good name cannot make a bad action kind. You have proved that repeatedly. A murmur passed among those leaving church. Horace's grip tightened on his cane. He shifted as if to block Lydia's path more completely. Stephen stepped nearer, not speaking for her, merely placing himself where Horace could no longer pretend the obstruction accidental. Sir Horace moved aside. When they reached the lane, Stephen stopped. Mrs. Dacre waited several paces away. This is the last moment in which withdrawal will cost you only gossip, he said. After tomorrow, it will cost much more. Do you want me to withdraw? No. The answer came without hesitation. But wanting you does not give me the right to keep you uninformed. Lydia heard the strain beneath the words. You have not informed me of everything. No. Then, why should I continue? Because everything I have told you is true. That is not the same as telling the whole truth. His face went still. No, it is not. She should have been frightened. Instead, she remembered the yard, the returned purse, the space he had given her to reconsider, the way he had faced a window so she might eat, without shame, and the question he had asked before touching one ribbon. At first, I chose you because I needed to escape a man who had chosen himself for me, she said. I do not choose you for that reason now. Stephen looked at her as though the lane had emptied around them. Why then? Because you let me finish speaking. Something vulnerable crossed his face. It vanished almost at once, but not before she saw it. I will try to remain worthy of that answer, he said. That night, in his room at the Bell and Crown, Stephen opened a folded note delivered by the silent courier. The message contained only 7 words. Eliza Wren has been seen in London. On Monday morning, the 25th of May, Lydia Peverell entered St. Jude's beneath a silence more severe than any whispering congregation could have made. Lady Peverell's pew stood empty. No mourning silk, no lowered lashes, no performance of maternal injury occupied the place where her mother had sat through 3 Sundays of banns. The absence was deliberate. It declared that Lydia had ceased to belong to the woman who had raised her. Mrs. Dacre walked beside her, steady and dignified in dove grey. Lydia wore a simple travelling gown of pale blue wool, chosen because it was the best garment she owned that had not been selected by her mother for someone else's approval. The small horn button rested inside her reticule. She had carried it through every banns Sunday, though she had not told Stephen. He waited near the chancel in a dark coat that fit him better than the garments he had worn at the posting yard. It was still plain. No embroidery, jewel, or fashionable cut announced wealth, yet something in him had altered. He stood as though the church belonged to no one and therefore could not intimidate him. When Lydia reached him, his eyes moved over her face, not her gown. You came, he said. You asked me to. I hoped you would. I did not assume it. The distinction steadied her. She turned toward the register table. Sir Horace Darrowby stood beside it. He had arrived before her and positioned himself where every witness must see him. His expression suggested that he had come not to prevent the marriage, but to make Lydia feel that he might. The vicar closed the parish book and addressed him with strained patience. "Sir Horace has raised questions concerning Mr. Stanhope's circumstances. I have explained that dissatisfaction is not an impediment." "I have raised more than dissatisfaction," Horace said. "The man refuses to state his occupation, his income, or the true purpose of his residence in Brackenhurst." "He has satisfied the residence requirement," the vicar replied. "The banns have been lawfully called. Unless you can prove an existing marriage, prohibited kinship, coercion, or another lawful obstacle, the ceremony may proceed." Horace looked at Lydia. "You need only say that you were frightened. No one will blame you." "I am not frightened of the marriage." "You should be frightened of him." Stephen's face remained unreadable. "If you possess knowledge that should prevent this ceremony, give it to the vicar." Horace's jaw tightened. He had suspicion, contempt, and money. He had no proof. "You will regret this," he told Lydia. "Perhaps," she said, "but the regret will be mine." The vicar motioned toward the altar. Mrs. Dacre took her place as witness. The innkeeper, who had agreed to serve as the second witness after seeing Stephen return Lady Peverell's purse, stood near the vestry door in an uncomfortable Sunday coat. Lydia moved forward. For the first time that morning, fear touched her. It did not come from Horace or from the empty pew. It came from the permanence of the next few minutes. Stephen noticed the pause. He did not take her hand. He offered his arm and waited. "We can still stop," he said softly, "not because he demands it. No, not because my mother is absent. No, and not because you think honor requires you to rescue me from my own words." Something moved in his eyes. "No." Lydia placed her hand upon his arm. The fabric was warm beneath her glove. "Then let us continue." The ceremony was simple. The vicar spoke of duty, faithfulness, and the solemn joining of two lives. Lydia answered clearly. Stephen's vows carried no hesitation. When the ring was required, Mrs. Dacre passed him a narrow gold band. Lydia looked at her in surprise. "The village goldsmith measured the blue ring you lent me last week," Mrs. Dacre whispered. "Mr. Stanhope asked whether it could be done without troubling you." Lydia remembered giving her former governess a small ring with a loose setting, believing it was to be repaired. The gold band fit. Stephen did not force it over her knuckle or hold her hand longer than necessary. His thumb brushed once against the side of her finger, a deliberate contact made reverent by restraint. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Lydia felt no sudden transformation. The church remained cold. Her mother's pew remained empty. Sir Horace remained angry, yet the gold upon her hand had been placed there only after she had spoken for herself. That difference was enough to make the moment feel entirely new. At the register table, Stephen signed first. His hand was steady. Stephen Stanhope, no false surname, no flourish meant to conceal the letters. Lydia signed beneath him. Mrs. Dacre and the innkeeper added their names. Horace remained until the last stroke of ink dried, as if waiting for the page to reject what the law had accepted. It did not. Outside the church, he approached Lydia one final time. "Your mother's door will not open to you after this. Then I shall not stand before it. You know nothing of where he means to take you." Stephen stepped close enough to be heard without raising his voice. I asked Lydia where she wished to go first. It was the first time he had spoken her Christian name before others. Horace noticed. So did Lydia. "And what did she say?" Horace asked. "That is not your concern." Lydia answered before Stephen could. Horace looked between them, then walked away without bowing. A closed carriage waited beyond the leach gate. Its panels bore no visible crest, but the horses were too fine, the harness too new, and the driver too disciplined for hired transport. Lydia paused. "You said you had access to a house." "I do. Is this your carriage?" "It is available to me." "That is not an answer." Stephen opened the door but did not urge her inside. "No, it is not a complete answer." She almost demanded the rest. Then she saw the weariness beneath his composure. Something had troubled him since the night before. Twice during the signing, his thumb had moved over the black enamel ring. Once, when the church door opened, he had looked toward the lane, with expectation sharp enough to resemble dread. Lydia entered the carriage. Mrs. Dacre followed. Stephen sat opposite them. The interior smelled of leather, beeswax, and fresh tea. A small travelling case had been fitted between the seats. After they left Brackenhurst, Stephen opened it and poured without asking a servant to assist. He placed Lydia's cup before her without sugar. She looked at it. "You remembered. You did not take sugar at the inn. You notice a great deal, not always soon enough." The answer was too heavy for tea. Lydia studied him. "Has something happened?" "I received news last night." His hand tightened briefly around his cup. "The woman I told you of may have been seen in London. Eliza Wren." "Yes. Will you go to her, if the report is true? And if she comes to you first?" He looked out at the hedgerows, rushing past. "Then I hope I shall have the courage to hear what she says." Lydia did not know why that frightened her. The road climbed, narrowed, and entered a wooded tract where the trees met overhead. Nearly 2 hours after leaving St. Jude's, the carriage passed a stone lodge. The gatekeeper emerged before the driver called. He removed his hat. Farther ahead, iron gates opened without delay. Lydia looked through the glass. Beyond them lay a broad avenue lined with beeches, and at its end, the pale frontage of a great house. "Stephen," she said, "what is this place?" "Briarholt. You called it family property." "It is." "Whose family?" He did not answer before the carriage rolled beneath the inner arch. Servants had gathered, despite what appeared to be hurried instructions not to assemble. A steward came down the steps, pale with anxiety. Stephen alighted first and offered Lydia his hand. She accepted it because the carriage step was high, not because her trust had survived the silence. The steward bowed deeply. "Welcome home, Your Grace." The words struck the courtyard and seemed to remain there. Lydia looked at the carved arms above the door, at the coronet worked into the stone, and at the servants lowering their heads. Her hand was still on Stephen's. He did not close his fingers around it. "Your Grace?" she repeated. Stephen's face held no defense. "I am Stephen Stanhope, Duke of Westmarsh." Lydia withdrew her hand. The gold wedding band felt suddenly heavier than iron. She opened her reticule, took out the plain horn button, and placed it on the stone ledge beside the carriage door. "I married the man who wore this," she said. "I do not yet know the man who owns this house." The steward's bow remained unfinished when Lydia turned back toward the stone ledge. The horn button lay where she had placed it, dark and ordinary beneath the carved arms of Westmarsh. Before a servant could mistake it for rubbish, Mrs. Dacre stepped forward, picked it up, and placed it quietly in Lydia's gloved palm. Lydia closed her fingers around it. Only then did she enter Briarholt Hall. The great house received her with a silence trained by generations of rank. Footmen lowered their eyes. A housekeeper waited beside the staircase with a ring of keys at her waist. Portraits of dead, Stanhope men looked down from the walls as if Stephen's deception were merely another family custom. He dismissed the assembled servants at once. "No formal presentation today," he said. "Her Grace has travelled and wishes for privacy." The title struck Lydia like a hand placed upon a bruise. "Do not use me to make this easier for them," she said. The servants froze. Stephen looked at her, then at the steward. "The Duchess is correct. No one is to assume her wishes. Mrs. Bell, prepare whichever rooms she chooses after she has seen them. Mrs. Dacre is to have an adjoining suite." The housekeeper curtsied. "Yes, Your Grace." Lydia disliked how quickly one sentence from him moved an entire household. She disliked more that he had used that power to obey her. They were shown to a morning room overlooking a broad south lawn. The furniture was pale, elegant, and impersonal. Stephen closed the door only after Mrs. Dacre had entered. He remained several paces from Lydia. "You deserve the entire truth. I deserved it yesterday." "Yes." The answer came without defense. Lydia placed the horn button on the table between them. "Begin with why a duke allowed himself to be called a beggar." Stephen removed his gloves. The black enamel ring remained on his little finger. "After Edward died, I found evidence that he had promised support to Eliza Wren. The payments were never made. By the time I tried to find her, she had disappeared from the London theatre world. So you dressed in rags." "Not at first. I sent men. I wrote to managers, lodging-house keepers, costumers, and attorneys. Every answer changed the moment my title appeared. And you decided poverty would make people truthful. I decided obscurity might." "Did it?" His gaze lowered briefly. "Sometimes. It also made cruelty easier to see." Lydia thought of the posting yard and her mother counting every coin in the returned purse. "You were observing us. At first. Testing us?" "I was looking for the network through which Eliza vanished. Touring players, posting houses, charitable lodging lists, anyone who might remember her without fearing House Stanhope. And then I offered to marry you." "Yes." His voice roughened. "I should have told you at once. Why did you not?" He walked to the window, but did not turn his back upon her. "Because you had chosen me when you believed I possessed nothing. I wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted without the title arriving first. You wanted an answer uncontaminated by power. So you denied me the information required to give an honest one. Yes, that was selfish. Yes, cowardly." His jaw tightened, but he did not look away. "Yes." Lydia had prepared herself for explanations polished into excuses. His agreement left her with nowhere to direct the anger except toward the injury itself. "You asked me repeatedly whether I wished to withdraw. I did, while withholding the one fact most likely to alter my choice. I told myself my name was Tretu, that I was unmarried, that the settlement would protect you, and that rank did not change the man you had met. But you knew it changed the marriage." "Yes." The room went very still. Mrs. Dacre stood near the door, present but silent. Lydia looked down at the wedding ring on her hand. It had not changed since the chapel. Its weight had. "I will not share your rooms." Stephen's face lost color, though his voice remained steady. "You will not be asked to. There will be no assumption of marital rights." "No. Mrs. Dacre remains, near me. Her suite will adjoin yours. I want access to a carriage whenever I choose, not whenever your steward approves. You shall have it. My correspondence will not be opened, copied, delayed, or redirected." "Agreed. And I want money that is mine to use without requesting it from you." Stephen crossed to the writing desk. He rang once, then stopped before pulling the bell a second time. "May I send for my solicitor and steward?" "You may." He waited until she nodded before doing so. Within the hour, Mr. Reed, the steward, who had greeted them, and a grey-haired solicitor named Mr. Fenner arrived with papers already prepared. Lydia learned that Stephen had arranged a marriage settlement before the ceremony. Her personal property, future inheritances, and any income legally hers were to remain protected from Sir Horace's advance to Lady Peverell. Stephen added written authority for Lydia to order a carriage, employ her own secretary, if she wished, draw upon a separate account, and send sealed correspondence through any servant she chose. He signed each instruction before witnesses. "This does not repair what I did," he said, after the men withdrew. "No, it is not meant to purchase forgiveness. Good. It is meant to ensure that my title cannot trap you while you decide what you think of the man." Lydia picked up the horn button. "I already know what I thought of him. And now? Now I know he was capable of kindness and deception in the same breath." Pain crossed his face. He accepted it without protest. The housekeeper returned with descriptions of several suites. Lydia chose rooms in the east wing, separated from Stephen's apartments by a gallery and 2 staircases. Mrs. Dacre selected the adjoining chamber. Stephen gave no sign of objection. He did not offer Lydia the Westmarsh diamonds, a ducal coronet, or any of the glittering objects Lady Peverell would have called compensation. Instead, he asked whether she wished dinner sent privately. "Tea first," Lydia said, more from exhaustion than appetite. A maid moved toward the service table, but Stephen stopped her with a glance. "I shall pour." The servants looked startled. Lydia almost told him not to turn an ordinary gesture into repentance. Then he prepared the tea, exactly as he had in the carriage and at the inn, without sugar, with only a little milk. He placed the cup on the table within her reach and withdrew before she touched it. The act was familiar. That made it more painful, not less. "You remember details," she said. "Some, but not always the ones that matter." No, he poured for Mrs. Dacre, then took his own cup to the far side of the room. There was no intimacy in the distance, but there was respect. For the first time since entering Briarholt, Lydia could breathe without feeling watched for the correct response. A servant arrived before she finished the tea. He carried 2 letters on a silver tray. One bore Lady Peverell's seal. The other was addressed to Stephen in an unfamiliar hand. Lydia opened her mother's letter first. It contained no apology. Lady Peverell wrote that Lydia had been deceived into an unsafe marriage and should return to Peverell House before the scandal became permanent. She added that Sir Horace remained willing to protect her reputation if she acted quickly. Lydia folded the page. "My mother has discovered concern for my safety, now that my husband outranks the man she chose." Stephen did not smile. "Will you return?" "Not today." He inclined his head, receiving the answer without relief he had any right to display. Then he opened his own letter. His eyes moved once across the page. The controlled stillness in him changed. "What is it?" Lydia asked. He looked at her over the paper. The report from London was true. Eliza Wren had been found. Had been. She left her lodging before my man arrived. Did someone warn her? It appears so. His thumb pressed against the black ring, which means someone knows I am searching. Lydia placed her mother's letter beside the horn button. The 2 objects seemed to belong to different worlds. Yet both had reached her through people who believed truth could be delayed until it became useful. "Then find her," she said, "but do not decide what I am permitted to know when you do." Stephen folded the letter with care. "I will not make that mistake again." Lydia held his gaze. "You have not yet earned the right to call it a mistake only once." He bowed his head. "Then I will earn it." By the morning of the 29th of May, Briarholt Hall had learned to move around Lydia's silence. Servants no longer entered her rooms without knocking twice. Her correspondence arrived sealed upon a separate tray. A carriage remained available in the East Court each afternoon, whether she used it or not. Stephen had kept every written promise made in the morning room. Yet, the obedience of a great household could not repair the fact that she had entered it without knowing whose threshold she crossed. The invitation from Tunbridge Wells lay beside her breakfast plate. Miss Viola Darrowby had written in a hand so elegant it seemed almost cruel, expressing delight at the prospect of presenting the new Duchess of Westmarsh to county society upon the Pantiles. Black wax sealed the page. Its impression was blurred, but the polished surface reminded Lydia of the mourning ring Stephen still wore. Lady Peverell's name appeared nowhere in the letter. Lydia, therefore, suspected her mother's influence in every line. Mrs. Dacre folded her napkin. "You needn't go. If I do not, my mother and Sir Horace will explain my absence for me. That does not make attendance wise. No, it makes it mine to decide." A footman entered with a message. His Grace asked whether Lydia would receive him in the morning room. Lydia considered the phrasing. Stephen had not summoned her. He had not assumed. "Yes," she said, "in half an hour." When he arrived, he carried a narrow mahogany box beneath one arm. He wore no mourning colours beyond the black enamel ring. His coat was dark and perfectly fitted. Yet Lydia still found herself searching for the missing horn button that belonged to another garment and another version of him. She had returned that button to her reticule after leaving it on the ledge at Briarholt. Mrs. Dacre had placed it in her hand. It remained there now, where no servant could polish meaning out of it. Stephen stopped several paces from the table. "You received Miss Darrowby's invitation, did you?" "A separate one. Sir Horace's name is included among the expected guests." "And my mother?" "Not written, but almost certainly attending." Lydia touched the edge of the card. "Then we should go." "We do not have to. I know." His expression changed at the answer. Not relief, respect. "There is something you should hear before we appear in public together," he said. He placed the mahogany box upon the table, but kept one hand on the lid. "It concerns Edward and Eliza Wren, Mrs." Dacre moved to a chair by the window, near enough to preserve propriety and far enough to grant them privacy. Lydia remained standing. "You told me your family forced them apart." "Yes." "You said Edward promised to provide for her." "He did." "And failed, yes." Stephen looked down at the box. Edward was 5 years older than I. He was the heir. And from childhood he was taught that every affection must serve House Stanhope. He obeyed in public and rebelled in private. Eliza was part of that rebellion. Was she merely part of it? No. The answer came sharply enough to reveal the wound beneath it. He loved her. Stephen drew a breath. At least, he believed he did. Perhaps he did love her and lacked the courage to honor it. Those two truths can exist together. Lydia heard no attempt to excuse the dead. That mattered. How did they meet? At a private theatrical in London. Edward disliked the performance and admired the woman who refused to flatter the patron who had hired her. He returned the following evening. Then again, "Your family discovered them." "My father did." Edward was threatened with the loss of his allowance, his place in the succession arrangements, and every friend dependent upon Stanhope patronage. Eliza was warned that no respectable theatre would employ her if she continued the attachment. Lydia thought of calling cards returned unopened and dinners arranged as though her consent were a detail, so Edward chose the house. Yes. Stephen's thumb moved once along the box lid. "He told me he intended to settle an annuity upon her. I believed it had been done. After his death, I found no completed instrument and no regular payment in the estate accounts. Did you search for her then? At once. She had left her lodgings. Her manager claimed not to know where she had gone. 2 women from her former company gave different answers, both after learning who had asked. That is why you abandoned your title. I did not abandon it. Bitterness touched his voice. I hid it, which is not the same act and not nearly as noble. Lydia let the distinction stand. What is in the box? Stephen lifted his hand from the lid. A letter addressed to Eliza in Edward's hand. It was found among papers removed from his rooms after his death. Sealed, still sealed. You have never read it? No. Why not send it? His face closed, then opened again by deliberate effort. Because I was afraid. Lydia waited. He had used the word without disguise. Afraid of what it contains? A promise of marriage. A confession that such a marriage occurred. Evidence that Edward bound the estate in some private way. Or only an apology so inadequate that delivering it would injure her again. Those possibilities belong to Eliza, not to you. I know. Do you? He accepted the question. Not fully. For 3 years, I told myself I was protecting her from an old wound, and the duchy from a claim I could not examine. In truth, I was preserving uncertainty, because uncertainty allowed me to postpone shame. Lydia looked at the box. Your brother may have failed her. Your family may have helped him do it. The letter will remain true, whether anyone opens it or not. Yes, and if it proves something that damages House Stanhope, then House Stanhope must bear it. He said the words steadily, but grief tightened his mouth. Lydia had seen his control used as armor, command, and deception. This was the first time she saw him use it simply to remain present before a truth he feared. She moved closer. If Eliza is found, the letter should go into neutral hands before it is opened. Mr. Fenner acts for my estate. Then not Mr. Fenner alone. Another solicitor, chosen without dependence upon you. Stephen nodded. Agreed. Eliza should decide whether to receive it privately or before witnesses. Agreed. And you will not determine which portions I am permitted to know. His gaze met hers. No. Lydia placed her hand upon the closed mahogany box. The wood was cool beneath her palm. It was not affection offered lightly. It was acknowledgement of the weight he had finally set down between them. Stephen looked at her hand, then placed his own beside it. He did not cover her fingers. He did not claim comfort she had not given. Their hands rested inches apart upon the same lid. My mother used the Peverell name to decide what I was allowed to want, Lydia said. Your family used Stanhope to decide what Edward was allowed to love. And I used it to decide what you were allowed to know. Yes, he did not flinch. I am trying not to do so again. Then come to Tunbridge Wells. His brows drew together. You are certain? No, certainty has been overvalued in both our families. I am choosing to go without it. Why? Because if my mother intends to tell county society what kind of marriage I have made, I prefer to be present when she does. A faint warmth entered his eyes. And if Sir Horace provokes you, you will allow me to answer. I will. If someone insults me, I will ask what you want before I act. If Eliza appears, the warmth vanished. His hand remained beside hers. Then I will listen before I command. Lydia studied him. That may be the harder promise. It is. She lifted her hand from the box. For one breath, Stephen's fingers remained where hers had been, as though the absence itself carried meaning. Then he withdrew as well. Mrs. Dacre rose from the window. When do we leave? On the 3rd of June, Lydia said. Stephen looked toward the invitation, its black wax catching the morning light. Miss Darrowby has chosen the pantiles. There will be witnesses. That is why she chose it, Lydia replied. Outside, beyond the long windows, a carriage turned into the distant drive. A veiled woman sat within, visible only for an instant, before the beeches concealed her from view. The pantals had been designed for display. By noon on the 3rd of June, every polished window, colonnade, and raised walk seemed arranged to reflect Lydia back to herself, as the woman who had married beneath her station and risen. Above it, in the same breath, county families turned as she approached beside Stephen. Their bows to him were deep. Their glances at her were sharper. Lydia wore no ducal jewels. She had chosen a cream walking dress with a narrow blue pelisse and kept the plain horn button inside her reticule. It steadied her more than diamonds would have done. Stephen walked at her left, formal enough to satisfy society and distant enough to honor the boundaries she had set. Mrs. Dacre followed with the patience of a woman who understood that chaperonage could also be a form of witness. "You needn't remain if this becomes intolerable," Stephen said quietly. "If I leave before anyone speaks, my mother will tell them why. And if they speak cruelly, you will allow me to answer." His gaze moved to her face. "I remember." Miss Viola Darrowby came toward them beneath the colonnade. She was fair, delicately dressed, and smiling with such exaggerated pleasure that Lydia recognized danger before a word was spoken. "Your Graces," Viola said, curtsing. "What an extraordinary delight. Kent has discussed almost nothing else. Then Kent must be suffering from a shortage of useful occupation," Lydia replied. Viola's smile tightened. "You are very brave to appear so soon." "After what?" "After so unconventional a beginning." Before Lydia could answer, Lady Peverell emerged from a knot of matrons. She wore soft grey and the expression of a mother prepared to forgive a child who had not asked pardon. Sir Horace stood behind her. "Lydia," Lady Peverell said, "I hoped you would come. Did you?" A mother always hopes her daughter will return to reason. Stephen's shoulders changed almost imperceptibly. Lydia felt the gathering force in him and answered first. "I came to walk, not to be reclaimed." Horace looked at Stephen. "You see what your deception has made of her." "Her words appear to belong entirely to her," Stephen said. A murmur moved through the nearby crowd. Lydia should have felt defended. Instead, she felt the attention shift towards Stephen, as though even her independence required ducal confirmation. She opened her mouth, but a woman's voice cut across the promenade. "Stephen." The name was spoken with grief, not surprise. A veiled woman in black half-mourning stepped from beneath the colonnade. She was not young, though sorrow had made age difficult to read. Her face was pale beneath the veil. On the little finger of her left hand gleamed a black enamel ring, edged in narrow gold. It resembled Stephen so closely that Lydia felt the ground lose its certainty. Stephen went still. "Eliza," the woman looked past him to Lydia. "You have brought your second wife." No one moved. Even the musicians near the spring seemed to falter. Lydia heard the phrase travel through the crowd before anyone dared repeat it. Stephen's voice hardened. "That is false." Eliza raised her hand, displaying the ring. "You said the same when your family came for me. I have never married you." Gretna Green, October 1814. "You called yourself Stephen Stanhope because you said the family would not forgive you if you used the title." Lady Peverell gripped Viola's arm. Horace looked shocked too quickly. Lydia noticed both reactions. But Eliza held the center of the scene. "Tell me exactly what happened," Lydia said. Stephen turned toward her. "Lydia, this is not the place." "It is the place she chose. Let her speak." Eliza's gaze fixed on Lydia with a mixture of guilt and resentment. He took me north. We stayed near the border. He gave me this ring and promised that once his father relented, I would be acknowledged. What did he look like? Lydia asked. A stir passed through the watchers. It was not the question they expected. Like him, Eliza's voice broke. Not precisely. Younger. He laughed more then. He tapped his left thumb against his glass when he lied. He sang the 23rd Psalm badly. There was a crescent scar near his shoulder where he fell from a chestnut horse at 15. Stephen's face lost colour. Lydia looked at him. He had no crescent scar. Edward might have. You knew the west corridor at Briarholt, Eliza continued. You knew the loose panel near the old schoolroom and the window seat where we hid letters. Stephen stepped forward. Enough. No, Lydia said. Eliza recoiled as 2 footmen approached from the far end of the walk. Stephen had not visibly summoned them, yet his title had trained men to anticipate command. Take Mrs. Wren to the private parlour at the Sussex Arms, he said. She is not to be harmed or questioned. Stephen, stop. The crowd is feeding on her. Then dismiss the crowd, not the woman. His jaw tightened. Lydia, she has made an accusation that can destroy your name. It concerns my name. Let me hear it. Not here. The authority in his voice silenced even those who pretended not to listen. It silenced Lydia's too, though not because she agreed. The footman escorted Eliza away. She did not resist. She looked back once, not at Stephen, but at Lydia, and the shame in her face was more troubling than any triumph could have been. Lady Peverell stepped close. Come home with me. No, you may not even be his lawful wife. That remains to be discovered. Horace offered his arm. Allow me to take you from this spectacle. Lydia looked at the man who had announced their engagement without her consent, and at the husband who had just removed another woman before she could finish speaking. I will leave with Mrs. Dacre. Stephen extended his hand. Lydia. She stepped back. The refusal was small, but everyone saw it. You promised to listen before you commanded. His face changed. I believed I was protecting you. That is not the promise you made. She turned away before he could answer. In the carriage, Mrs. Dacre did not ask whether Eliza had spoken truth. She only said, You noticed the scar. Yes, and his grace? He knew whom she described. Lydia pressed her palm over the reticule. The horn button lay beneath the leather, still hers, still where she had placed it. But he chose silence again. That evening, Stephen went alone to the Sussex Arms. Eliza sat in a private parlour with a maid near the door. Her veil lay folded beside her. Without it, she looked more exhausted than dangerous. You know I am not the man who took you north, Stephen said. You wear his face. Edward was my brother. Eliza's hands tightened. He told me his name was Stephen. Then he lied to you, as men of your house do. The words struck because they were deserved. Stephen placed a purse on the table. Withdraw the claim publicly. I will settle your debts and arrange passage to France. You may begin again where no one knows this story. Eliza stared at the purse. And the Duchess? She will be protected. From the truth he did not answer. That silence was his second failure of the day. By the time he returned to Briarholt, Lydia was waiting in the east morning room. He had removed his gloves, but not changed his coat. A narrow receipt protruded from the inner cuff where it had caught against the lining. Lydia recognized the name of the Sussex Arms before he noticed it. The paper bore that evening's date. She looked from the receipt to his face. You went to her. Stephen stopped. Yes. Alone. Yes. After promising you would listen before you commanded. I did listen, and then his hand closed over the cuff too late. I offered her money to withdraw the claim. Lydia felt no surprise. That was worse. "You have purchased silence again," she said, "and this time you expected me to live inside it." "You have purchased silence again," Lydia said, "and this time you expected me to live inside it." Stephen stood in the East morning room with the Sussex Arms receipt caught between his fingers. The paper seemed too small to carry the weight of what he had done. Beyond the windows, evening lay blue across the lawns of Briarholt. Inside, no servant moved, and no clock was loud enough to disturb the stillness between them. Mrs. Dacre remained near the door, not intruding, not leaving. Stephen looked at the receipt, then at Lydia. Yes. The answer came without evasion. Lydia had prepared herself for an explanation. She had expected him to speak of scandal, legal danger, Eliza's distress, or the duty of protecting the duchy. His single word denied her the satisfaction of defeating an excuse. "You offered her money and passage to France." "Yes." "In exchange for withdrawing her claim." "Yes." "After promising me that you would listen before you commanded." "Yes." Lydia felt anger rise, but beneath it lay something colder. "Did you believe you were keeping me safe?" Stephen did not answer at once. "I told myself that I was." "And what were you actually protecting?" His gaze dropped to the black enamel ring on his hand. "My brother's name, my house, my fear that the accusation might be true in some form I did not understand. And yourself?" "Yes." The honesty did not soften the wrong. It only made its shape clearer. "You offered Eliza a new life in exchange for giving up the right to tell us what happened to her." "I did." "You offered me a carriage, money, sealed correspondence, and private rooms, so that I would not feel trapped. Then you tried to build the truth into a room I could not enter." Stephen's face tightened. "I have no defense." "Good. Do not invent one." "I will not." Lydia crossed to the writing desk. "The offer must be withdrawn tonight." "It will be. Not by a private message that can later be denied. No, a witnessed letter. It must state that no money, passage, lodging, or protection is conditional upon Mrs. Wren withdrawing her claim." Stephen inclined his head. "Agreed. And Mr. Fenner cannot be the only man holding the evidence." "He is my solicitor." "Precisely." Stephen looked toward Mrs. Dacre. "Do you have someone in mind?" Lydia had considered the matter during the carriage journey from Tunbridge Wells, though she had not known then how quickly she would need the answer. "Mr. Samuel Greaves in the town. He acted once for Mrs. Dacre's brother and has no dependence upon House Stanhope." Mrs. Dacre nodded. "He is careful and not easily impressed." "Then Mr. Greaves shall be asked," Stephen said. "Asked," Lydia repeated. "Not instructed, asked." She turned back to him. "Your mourning ring must be placed in his custody." Stephen's thumb moved over the enamel. It was the gesture Lydia had seen since the posting yard, part grief and part concealment. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the object could no longer remain only his. "Yes, Eliza's ring must be placed there too if she consents." "Yes." "Edward's sealed letter will go with them." A visible struggle passed through him. "Unopened." "Unopened," Lydia said, "until Eliza decides whether she will receive it privately or before witnesses." "Agreed." "You will not meet her alone again." "I will not." "You will not send servants, agents, or attorneys to frighten her into silence." "No, and I will speak with her without your briefing me first." Stephen's gaze sharpened with concern, but he did not refuse. "You may." "Not may. I will." Lydia held his eyes. "If what she says destroys the reputation of House Stanhope, that cannot be prevented by deciding I am too fragile to hear it." "I know. Do you?" "I am beginning to." His voice was quieter now. "That is not enough, but it is the truth." Lydia rang the bell. When a footman entered, she requested Mr. Reed. Mr. Fenner, and a clerk to witness correspondence. Stephen did not countermand her. Within half an hour, the morning room had become a place of sober record rather than marital confrontation. Mr. Fenner brought paper, sealing wax, and a leather document case. Mr. Reed stood beside him. Mrs. Dacre remained at Lydia's right. Stephen wrote the withdrawal in his own hand. He stated that his offer to Eliza Wren had been made without Lydia's knowledge, that it was revoked without condition, and that Eliza would receive independent advice whether she maintained or withdrew her claim. He signed the letter. Mrs. Dacre and Mr. Reed witnessed it. Mr. Fenner sealed it for delivery to the Sussex Arms. "A copy will go to Mr. Greaves," Lydia said. Mr. Fenner glanced at Stephen. Stephen answered before the solicitor could. "Her Grace's instruction is mine." Lydia disliked the title less in that moment because he used it to confirm her authority rather than replace it. Stephen removed the black enamel ring from his little finger. The skin beneath it was pale. He held the ring for one moment, his expression unreadable, then placed it in a small velvet-lined evidence box. Mr. Fenner closed the lid, applied a paper seal, and signed across it. Lydia signed as witness. Mrs. Dacre added her name. "Edward's letter," Lydia said. Stephen sent for the mahogany box. When it arrived, he opened only the outer lid and lifted the sealed letter without disturbing the wax. Mr. Fenner examined the seal, described its condition in writing, and placed the letter in a second packet. Lydia watched Stephen surrender it. He did not look noble. He looked bereaved. The distinction mattered. "Mrs. Wren's ring cannot be taken without her consent," Mr. Fenner said. "Mr. Greaves should make the request." "He will," Lydia replied, "and if she refuses, that refusal will be recorded without force." Stephen nodded. "Yes." The men withdrew with the sealed materials. The letter of withdrawal, left for Tunbridge Wells under 2 signatures and a delivery receipt. By the following afternoon, Mr. Greaves sent confirmation that Eliza had received it. She had agreed to place her own black enamel ring in his custody, after he explained that doing so did not surrender her claim. His clerk had sealed it separately and issued her a receipt. Both rings now rested in neutral hands, in separate boxes, under separate seals. The Edward letter remained unopened. Lydia read the confirmations twice. Then she went to her dressing room and opened the small jewel box set upon the table. Her wedding ring still circled her finger. She had worn it through the journey, the Pantiles, and Stephen's confession. Until that moment, she had not decided whether removing it would be a declaration or merely an act of rest. She drew it off slowly. The pale mark beneath it looked strangely intimate. Mrs. Dacre stood behind her, but said nothing. Lydia placed the ring inside the jewel box and closed the lid. She did not return it to Stephen. It remained hers, as did the choice it represented. When she re-entered the morning room, Stephen was waiting near the window. His left hand looked bare without the mourning ring. His attention dropped to Lydia's unadorned finger, then returned to her face. He did not ask. "The crescent scar," Lydia said. "Eliza described it as near the shoulder." "Yes. Do you have such a scar?" "No." "Did Edward?" Stephen's eyes closed for a brief moment. He fell from a chestnut horse when he was 15. A broken branch cut him below the left shoulder. The scar curved like a crescent. Lydia felt the memory of the Pantiles rearrange itself. Eliza had known the west corridor, the schoolroom panel, Edward's psalm, Edward's habits, and Edward's body. She had not known Stephen. "She was remembering your brother," Lydia said, "and calling him by your name." "Yes, because he gave her that name, or because someone taught her to use it." "I do not know." "Then I will ask her." Stephen's instinct to object appeared and stopped before it reached his mouth. "How do you wish it arranged?" "At her lodging, Mrs. Dacre with me. A female clerk from Mr. Greaves's office present. You will wait elsewhere." Pain and respect crossed his face together. "I will." A message arrived before dusk. Eliza Wren had agreed to receive Lydia on the 8th of June. Only once, the note said. Lydia folded it and placed it beside the closed jewel box. "Then once must be enough," she said. Eliza Wren's lodging stood above a milliner's shop on a narrow Tunbridge, Wells Street, where every passing carriage seemed to shake the window panes. On the 8th of June, Lydia climbed the stairs with Mrs. Dacre beside her, and Miss Hale, a young clerk from Mr. Greaves's office, following with a leather folio pressed against her chest. Stephen had obeyed Lydia's conditions. He waited in the public coffee room below, where the innkeeper, 2 commercial travellers, and half a dozen newspapers made secrecy impossible. He had not asked what Lydia intended to say. He had not tried to prepare her against Eliza. That restraint did not erase his earlier failures. But Lydia felt its weight as clearly as she had felt the absence of her wedding ring that morning. Eliza received them in a sitting room too small, for the heavy black curtains hung at its windows. She wore plain mourning grey rather than the dramatic black of the pantiles. Without her veil, the lines around her eyes were visible, and so was the exhaustion beneath them. Her left hand was bare. Mr. Greaves had sealed her black enamel ring in neutral custody 2 days earlier and given her a signed receipt. The loss of it appeared to trouble her. Her fingers repeatedly closed around the place where it had rested. "You asked for one meeting," Lydia said. "I won't demand another." Eliza looked toward Miss Hale's folio. "You brought a clerk, a witness who does not serve my husband. You say husband very easily." "No," Lydia replied. "I say it carefully." Mrs. Dacre sat near the door. Miss Hale took a chair at a small side table, opened her folio and waited. Lydia remained standing until Eliza gestured toward the seat opposite her. "You want me to confess that I lied," Eliza said. "I want to understand what was true before someone taught you how to arrange it falsely." Eliza's mouth tightened. "I married Stephen Stanhope in Scotland." "Tell me again." "You heard me." "I heard you before a crowd. I am listening now." Eliza looked toward the darkened window. "We travelled north in October of 1814. He said his family would never consent. He said Scotland would be safer." "Where did you sleep on the first night?" "At an inn outside Barnet." "What did he eat?" Eliza turned sharply. "What sort of question is that?" "A simple one. You remember the West Corridor at Briarholt. You remember a scar. You remember a psalm. I am asking what you remember when no audience was present." Suspicion gave way to something less guarded. He hated boiled mutton. He pushed it around his plate and fed pieces to the inn dog when no one watched. "Did Stephen do that?" "The man I knew did." "How did he laugh?" Eliza's eyes changed, with his head turned slightly away, as if laughter were an admission. "He tapped his left thumb against the table when he lied." "Not loudly, 3 times. Lydia thought of Stephen's still hands, his control, and the thumb that moved only over Edward's mourning ring. "What song did he sing badly?" "It wasn't a song. It was the 23rd Psalm. He always lost the line after the Valley of the Shadow." "Did he call his brother Stephen?" "He hardly spoke of his brother." "What did he call himself when you were alone?" Eliza hesitated. "Stephen." "Always?" "Yes." The answer was too quick. Lydia leaned forward. "Mrs. Wren, I am not asking whether you loved him." Eliza flinched. "I did. I believe you. You believe nothing I say. I believe you knew a man who had lived at Briarholt. I believe he bore a crescent scar below his left shoulder. I believe he knew the loose panel near the old schoolroom and that he sang badly. I believe he left you with promises he did not keep." Eliza's chin trembled once before she steadied it. "Then what more do you want?" "I want to know why you called that man Stephen when every detail belongs to Edward Stanhope." The room seemed to contract. Miss Hale's pen stopped above the page. Eliza looked toward the door as though measuring the distance to it. Lydia did not move to block her. "Edward is dead," Eliza said. "Yes. Stephen wears his face." "Not exactly. Enough. Enough for grief, not enough for truth." Eliza rose abruptly. A small ivory prayer book slipped from her lap and struck the carpet. Something metallic spun from between its pages. Miss Hale bent first, then stopped before touching it. A round brass token lay near the hearth, stamped with a lyre on one side. The instrument was reversed, its strings slanting in the wrong direction. Eliza moved to retrieve it, but Lydia said, "Please wait." Miss Hale used a folded sheet of paper to lift the token without handling it directly. "Do you recognize it?" Lydia asked. Eliza's face had gone pale. "It is nothing. It came from your prayer book. A theatre token." "Which theatre?" "A benefit performance, patronized by Miss Viola Darrowby." Eliza stared at her. That was answer enough. Lydia had seen the reversed lyre impressed on the corner of Viola's invitation card. A fashionable device she used for charitable theatricals. "Viola found you through the theatre," Lydia said. "She helped me." "How?" "She said I had been forgotten." "By whom?" "By all of them." Eliza pressed one hand to her throat. "She said the Duke had married another woman while I had nothing. She said he would deny me unless I spoke where witnesses could hear." "Did she tell you to use Stephen's name?" "She helped me remember what had happened." "That is not the same thing. You know nothing of being erased." Lydia's voice softened. "My mother arranged my marriage, my silence, and my gratitude before I had spoken. I know enough to recognize when someone calls control assistance." Eliza sank back into the chair. For the first time, anger left her face. What remained was fear. "Sir Horace paid the lodging debt," Lydia said. "Did he also pay for your journey?" Eliza looked toward Miss Hale. "I won't answer that. Not today, not ever." "Then tell me about the ring." Her bare fingers closed. "It was given to me. At Gretna Green?" Silence. "Was it exchanged before witnesses?" Lydia asked. "It was his promise." "Was it blessed?" "No." "Did you give him a ring in return?" "No." "Did anyone record a marriage?" Eliza's breath shortened. "We meant to marry." The words emerged so quietly that Miss Hale nearly missed them. "But did you?" Lydia asked. Eliza's eyes filled, though no tears fell. "He said we had no need of a clergyman. He said words between us were enough in Scotland." "Were you in Scotland when he said them?" Eliza looked away. "Near it." Lydia felt grief settle into the room, not only Eliza's but Edward's cowardice and Stephen's inherited shame. "The black ring was real," Lydia said. "The love may also have been real. Neither proves that Stephen married you." "You defend him?" "No. I am separating his wrongs from his brother's." Eliza pressed both hands together. "Viola said you would call me a whore and have me put out. Viola does not know me. Horace said if I withdrew, I would lose the rooms, the money, everything. I can arrange independent protection through Mr. Greaves. Not through Stephen, not through House Stanhope. It will not depend upon what you say." Eliza gave a broken laugh. "That is what dukes call money when they want obedience. Then no money, only a solicitor who belongs to neither side and a safe room while you decide." Lydia nodded toward the token. "May Miss Hale record where this was found and take it to Mr. Greaves with your permission?" Eliza stared at the reversed lyre. At last, she nodded. Yes. Miss Hale wrapped the token, noted its condition, and asked Eliza to sign the entry. Eliza did so with an unsteady hand. Who made the ring? Lydia asked. A goldsmith in London. Name him. Mr. Pelham, near Ludgate Hill. He repaired it in 1813 when the enamel cracked. Before the journey north. Eliza closed her eyes. Yes, that single date loosened the story further. The ring had existed before the alleged marriage and had been repaired while Edward was alive. Lydia rose. I will not ask you for a confession today. Why? Because fear gives other people's words the sound of one's own. Eliza looked at her with open bewilderment. You should hate me. Perhaps I shall, when I know which choices were truly yours. Below, Stephen was standing when Lydia entered the coffee room. He searched her face, but did not approach until she crossed the floor. Did she speak? He asked. Enough. Was she harmed? No, he let out a breath. I kept my promise. You did. Lydia touched her fingertips briefly to his sleeve. It was not forgiveness and not surrender. It was acknowledgement. Stephen looked down at her hand, but did not cover it. It was the hardest, honest thing I have done, he said. A messenger from Mr. Greaves arrived before they left. He carried a folded note from London, delivered by express courier. Mr. Pelham's old Audiobook had been found. The black enamel ring had been commissioned and paid for in 1813 by E. Stanhope, not Stephen Stanhope. On the 10th of June, the two black enamel rings were placed side by side upon green baize in Mr. Greaves's temporary office at Briarholt. They looked almost identical until one knew where to look. Stephen's ring was newer, its gold edge unbroken, its inner surface engraved with the initials SS and ES. Above them, in letters so small that Mr. Greaves required a lens, appeared a single word, brother. Eliza's ring bore a faint repair seam beneath the enamel and a maker's mark near the inner rim. The goldsmith's authenticated note lay beside it. Mr. Pelham confirmed that the ring had been commissioned in 1813 by E. Stanhope for E. Wren. It had been repaired before the journey. Eliza claimed had ended in marriage. Mr. Fenner attended for House Stanhope, but he did not control the table. Mr. Greaves did. Miss Hale recorded every seal broken, every object examined, and every person present. Lydia sat opposite Stephen. Mrs. Dacre remained at her right. Eliza had chosen not to attend, but she had given written consent for her ring to be opened and compared in her absence. She had also requested a complete copy of the findings. Stephen's left hand rested bare upon his knee. Lydia noticed that his thumb still moved, as if searching for the ring no longer there. Mr. Greaves lifted Eliza's ring with padded forceps. The inscription is not matrimonial, he said. There is no reference to a wife, a wedding date, or a place of marriage. It was still a promise, Lydia said. Yes, Mr. Greaves replied, but not proof of the promise she later described. Stephen looked at the older ring. Edward gave her something real and left her to build a future upon it. He may have encouraged that future, Lydia said. Do not make her foolish merely because he was afraid. Stephen accepted the rebuke with a small inclination of his head. You are right, mister. Greaves turned to the sealed packet containing Edward's letter. The wax remained intact, the crest impressed clearly. Miss Hale read aloud the description she had recorded when the letter entered custody. Stephen confirmed the handwriting and seal. Lydia confirmed that she had seen the letter before it was transferred, but had not read it. Mrs. Dacre did the same. Mrs. Wren has requested that the letter be opened before neutral witnesses and that relevant portions be copied for her, Mr. Greaves said. Stephen's face tightened. proceed. The seal cracked softly. The sound was no louder than a twig breaking. Yet Lydia felt Stephen brace as though the room had shifted beneath him. Mr. Greaves unfolded the letter and read in silence first. His expression gave nothing away. Then he looked at Stephen. "His Grace may prefer that I read it aloud." "No," Stephen said. "Everyone present has a right to hear." Mr. Greaves began. Edward's words were elegant at first, full of regret without confession. Then the polish weakened. He admitted that he had allowed Eliza to believe marriage remained possible after his family had forbidden it. He admitted that he had spoken of Scotland, but had never taken vows, never made a declaration before witnesses, and never entered any lawful marriage. He had given her the ring as a pledge of affection, and later lacked the courage to explain that he would not keep the greater promise attached to it. He wrote that he intended to settle an annuity upon her. He named the sum, the banker through whom it was to be paid, and the shame he deserved if he failed. The instrument had never been completed. By the final lines, Edward no longer sounded like an heir. He sounded like a frightened man who knew fear had injured someone he claimed to love. Mr. Greaves finished and placed the letter flat upon the baize. Silence followed. Stephen did not move. Lydia saw grief in the rigid line of his shoulders, but something harsher than grief lay beneath it. "He knew," Stephen said. "He knew exactly what he had done." "Yes," Lydia replied, "and he wrote the truth too late." Stephen's gaze remained on the letter. "My father must have found this after Edward died." It was placed among sealed estate papers instead of being sent. Mr. Fenner looked uncomfortable. "That appears likely." "Then House Stanhope did not merely fail Eliza," Stephen said. "It preserved the failure. No one contradicted him." Mr. Greaves next produced a certified copy from the Bell and Crown posting house book. An entry, dated the 31st of May, recorded payment for Eliza Wren's journey from London to Tunbridge Wells. The sum had been entered under the initials H.D. The inn clerk's accompanying statement identified Sir Horace Darrowby as the gentleman who settled the account through an agent. Lydia felt no surprise, only the cold satisfaction of seeing intention take shape. Miss Hale then unwrapped the brass theatre token recovered from Eliza's prayer book. A patronage list from the recent charitable performance bore Viola Darrowby's name, and the same reversed lyre device. A former dresser had provided a statement that Viola had asked privately whether anyone knew the whereabouts of Eliza Wren. "This connects Miss Darrowby to Mrs. Wren," Mr. Greaves said. "It does not yet prove that she coached the false claim." Eliza said, "Viola helped her remember," Lydia replied, "which may become stronger evidence if Mrs. Wren chooses to say more." A third document lay unopened. It was the statement of a courier who had carried 2 letters between Peverell House and Tunbridge Wells during the days before the Pantiles confrontation. He could identify Lady Peverell's house and Viola's lodging, but he had not seen the contents. The chain led toward Lydia's mother without yet reaching her hand. "We have proof against Horace for the journey," Lydia said. "A link between Viola and Eliza. A link between Peverell House and Viola, but not yet proof that my mother knew the claim was false." "Correct," Mr. Greaves said, "and we should not call suspicion proof merely because it wounds less than uncertainty." Stephen looked at Lydia. "That is what I did at the Pantiles. Yes, I treated uncertainty as danger and danger as permission." "Yes," he did not look away. "I am sorry." It was not the first apology, but this one came before witnesses and without expectation of comfort. Lydia felt its sincerity. She also felt that sincerity did not close the wound. Mr. Greaves resealed the rings in separate boxes, each bearing fresh signatures across the paper joins. Edward's letter was placed in a third packet with copies ordered for Eliza and Stephen. The original remained in neutral custody. The posting-house register stayed at the Bell and Crown. Only the certified copy and clerk's statement remained with Mr. Greaves. When the meeting ended, the others left in measured order. Mrs. Dacre paused at the door, met Lydia's eyes, and stepped into the corridor. Stephen remained seated. The afternoon light had shifted across the table, leaving Edward's sealed packet in shadow. "I spent 3 years wanting to believe my brother had been misunderstood," he said. "He was misunderstood," Lydia replied. "You believed him braver than he was. Is that kinder?" "No, only more accurate." Stephen pressed his palms together. "I thought finding Eliza would allow me to complete a debt and restore order. Instead, every truth reveals another choice my family made for her. You cannot restore what Edward denied her. I know. You can ensure the annuity is paid because it was promised, not because silence is purchased. Yes, and you can let her decide whether she wants the Stanhope name anywhere near her future." Yes, the quiet obedience in his answers no longer felt like defeat. It felt like discipline redirected toward honesty. Lydia looked at his bare left hand. She remembered that same hand returning her mother's purse, hovering before, touching her bonnet ribbon, and reaching toward her at the pantiles when she refused it. Slowly, she placed her hand upon the table between them, palm upward. Stephen saw it and went still. He did not assume. "May I?" he asked. "Yes." He laid his hand in hers. Lydia closed her fingers around it. The contact was warm, sustained, and entirely without urgency. Stephen's thumb rested against the side of her hand, but did not move. He seemed afraid that even comfort might become a claim if he took more than she gave. "This is not forgiveness for the pantiles," Lydia said. "I know. Or for the money you offered. I know. It is because you surrendered the letter before you knew what it contained." His eyes lifted to hers. "I nearly told you I loved you just now." Lydia's breath caught, but she did not release his hand. "Why did you stop?" "Because grief should not press you into answering." Something tender and painful opened within her. She had begun to know her own heart, but knowing was not yet the same as speaking. "Then do not say it today," she replied. "Sit with me instead." Stephen bowed his head over their joined hands. "Gladly." They remained that way until footsteps hurried along the corridor. A stable boy entered only after Mrs. Dacre opened the door. His face was pale from running. Your Grace, Mrs. Wren has been taken from her lodging." A post-chaise left for the Dover Road under another name. Lydia's hand tightened around Stephen's. This time, he did not move before she spoke. "Do not send men after the chaise," Lydia said. Stephen's hand remained in hers, though every line of his body had tightened at the stable boy's news. Not yet. The boy stood in the doorway of Mr. Greaves's office, breathless and mud-spattered. "Tell me exactly what you heard." "Mrs. Wren was put into a post-chaise at her lodging, Your Grace. The driver said they were bound for Dover, but they meant to change horses at the Bell and Crown first. A gentleman's servant paid double to avoid the main road." Lydia released Stephen's hand and rose. "Horace wants her seen leaving for the coast. Once she disappears, he will say she accepted money and fled because her claim was false. Then we stop the chaise," Stephen said. "No, we delay it before witnesses." She turned to Mr. Reed. "Send a rider to the toll house beyond Brackenhurst. He is to ask the keeper to note the chaise, the horses, the number of passengers, and the time. Nothing more." Stephen understood at once. a record that cannot be called a ducal invention. Yes, send another message to the Bell and Crown. The innkeeper must hold the chaise in the public yard for a wheel inspection. A loose tire, a damaged linchpin, anything ordinary enough not to resemble an arrest. I can have 6 riders there within the hour. You will have 2, unarmed. No Stanhope livery. His instinct resisted. She saw it and waited. At last he nodded. 2. Mrs. Dacre comes with me. Mr. Greaves or Miss Hale must attend. Eliza is not to be carried back here as though she were a prisoner. Agreed, and no one speaks to her until I do. Stephen's gaze held hers. Agreed. By the time their carriage reached the Brackenhurst road, the June afternoon had hardened into heat. Dust hung behind every cart. Lydia sat forward, one gloved hand braced against the leather strap, while Mrs. Dacre and Miss Hale occupied the opposite seat. Stephen rode outside beside the driver, rather than crowd the carriage with his urgency. He had followed Lydia's plan exactly. No outriders in ducal colours announced pursuit. No command had gone ahead except the request for a public inspection. At the toll house, a folded note waited. The keeper had recorded a dark post-chaise passing eastward with 1 veiled woman, 1 male attendant, and a driver hired from Tunbridge Wells. The vehicle had turned toward Brackenhurst at 3:02. Lydia read the entry and handed it to Miss Hale. Keep it with your folio. When they reached the Bell and Crown, the chaise stood in the same posting yard where Stephen had returned Lady Peverell's purse. 1 rear wheel had been raised upon a jack. The innkeeper argued loudly with the driver about a loosened iron tire. Curious travellers watched from beneath the arch. Eliza sat inside the vehicle with the curtain half drawn. A narrow-faced man stood near the horses, his hand inside his coat. He recognized Stephen first. Then he saw Lydia descend. Her Grace, the innkeeper said, bowing. The carriage cannot safely proceed until the wheel is examined. Thank you, Lydia replied. She approached the chaise without Stephen at her side. Mrs. Wren, the curtain moved. Eliza's face appeared, pale and rigid. I was told you wished me gone. By whom? Eliza looked toward the narrow-faced man. He turned away. Lydia followed her gaze. Sir Horace's servant? She asked. The man stepped backward. Stephen did not seize him. He only moved between the man and the gate. You are free to leave, Stephen said, but the innkeeper will record your name and the account you used. The servant's face changed. He pushed past a groom and ran beneath the arch. No one pursued him. In his haste, a folded paper slipped from his pocket and landed beside the mounting block. Miss Hale reached it first. She picked it up with a clean cloth, unfolded it only enough to identify a payment chit, and carried it directly to the innkeeper's desk for witnessing. The signature at the bottom was H. Darrowby. Lydia opened the chaise door. Mrs. Wren, no one here will force you to return with us. You may remain at this inn, go back to your lodging, or continue toward Dover after the wheel is repaired. But you must choose without a man being paid to choose for you. Eliza stared at her. They said you would have me confined. I will not. The Duke offered France. Stephen stood several paces away. I withdrew that offer because it was wrong, he said. The withdrawal was witnessed. Eliza looked between them, bewildered by a power that had stopped commanding. Come inside, Lydia said. Not to Briarholt, to the inn parlour. There are witnesses, and the door will remain open. Eliza stepped down. Her knees nearly failed beneath her, but Lydia did not seize her. Mrs. Dacre offered an arm, and Eliza accepted it. In the private parlour overlooking the yard, Miss Hale recorded every person present. Mr. Greaves arrived before dusk, summoned from Brackenhurst. by the second rider. Eliza sat near the open door with tea untouched before her. "Viola found me," she said at last. "She came through a woman who once dressed me at the theatre. She knew about Edward. She knew I had debts." "Sir Horace paid them," Lydia said. "Yes, he said the Duke had stolen my life, and that I could make him acknowledge me." "Did he know Edward had called himself Stephen?" Eliza's mouth trembled. "I told Viola that Edward sometimes used his brother's name when we travelled. She said it proved he had meant to hide the marriage. She made me repeat everything until the story sounded certain. The West Corridor, the Psalm, the scar, all true, but about Edward, yes." The word broke from her. Lady Peverell came once. She said Lydia had been deceived and only needed to be freed before pride trapped her forever. She said no honest woman would remain with a man accused of bigamy. Lydia felt the wound but not surprise. Did my mother know the claim was false? She knew I had never stood before a clergyman. Horace said Scotland required no clergyman if the promise was clear. He told me to say Gretna Green because people believe what they already fear. And today, Viola said the goldsmith's reply had ruined everything. Horace said I must leave before I was forced to confess. He promised money in Dover and passage abroad. Eliza looked towards Stephen. I did lie, but he loved me. Edward loved me. Perhaps he did, Stephen said, and he failed you. Both truths will be entered. Eliza covered her face. Lydia moved beside her, not touching until Eliza lowered her hands. Mr. Greaves will arrange another solicitor for you if you do not wish him to act. The choice will not belong to House Stanhope. Eliza nodded faintly. Stephen turned to Mr. Greaves. Every remaining family letter concerning Edward and Mrs. Wren will be delivered into independent custody tonight. Nothing stays at Briarholt because it is embarrassing. Mr. Greaves inclined his head. I will issue a complete receipt. By evening, Eliza had signed a voluntary statement, the toll-house entry, the abandoned payment chit, and the innkeeper's account were sealed separately. She remained at the Bell and Crown under Mrs. Dacre's supervision until independent lodging could be arranged. When the witnesses had gone, Lydia stood alone with Stephen in the quiet yard. The light had faded behind the arch. The post where Horace had once thrust him still bore a pale scrape in the wood. You did not command, she said. I wanted to. I know. I trusted your plan before I knew whether it would work. I know that too. He looked tired, stripped of rank in a way the ragged coat had never achieved. The letters may shame my family for generations, and you surrendered them because you were right. Lydia stepped toward him. He did not move. She closed the distance and placed her arms around him. For one startled breath, Stephen remained still. Then his hands settled carefully at her back, holding without claiming. The embrace was warm, steady, and earned by every difficult restraint that had come before it. When Lydia drew back, his gaze dropped to her mouth and returned at once to her eyes. May I kiss you? He asked. Lydia touched the lapel of his coat. You may kiss the man I know now. Stephen bent slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. His lips met hers with tenderness before longing, a promise shaped by permission rather than possession. The kiss deepened only when Lydia leaned closer. When he began to withdraw, she caught his lapel and drew him back. This time she kissed him. By 11 on Saturday morning, the 20th of June, the long room of the Bell and Crown held nearly every person who had witnessed Lydia's humiliation upon the pantiles. County families occupied the chairs nearest the windows. Tradesmen, inn-guests, and parish witnesses stood along the walls. At the far end, a local magistrate sat beside Mr. Greaves, not to conduct a trial, but to receive sworn statements and preserve an orderly record. The posting-house register remained open upon the innkeeper's own desk. Nothing had been removed from the place where it was kept. Lydia entered with Mrs. Dacre. Stephen walked beside her, but did not offer his arm until she looked at him and chose to take it. The gesture lasted only to the front row. Then he stepped back, leaving her a clear path to the table. Lady Peverell sat opposite them in dove-grey silk. Sir Horace stood at her shoulder. Viola occupied a chair near Eliza Wren, though Eliza had asked for an independent solicitor, and now sat beside that gentleman instead. I requested this meeting, Lady Peverell began, because my daughter has been cruelly deceived. Whatever errors were made, they were made to free her from an unsafe marriage. Lydia looked at her mother. When did you first hear of Eliza Wren? After your husband's past became known. That isn't a date. Lady Peverell's mouth tightened. Mr. Greaves placed a packet upon the table. A courier has sworn that he carried correspondence from Peverell House to Miss Darrowby's lodging before the Pantiles' accusation. Correspondence proves nothing, Viola said. Then perhaps you'll explain the theatre token. Lydia replied. Miss Hale opened the sealed wrapper under Mr. Greaves's supervision. The brass token appeared, its reversed lyre matching the device printed upon Viola's patronage list. The former dresser's signed statement was read aloud. Viola had asked where Eliza Wren might be found. I supported theatrical women in distress, Viola said. That's hardly a crime. No, Lydia answered. Finding Mrs. Wren wasn't the wrong. Teaching her to remember Edward with Stephen's name was. Eliza's face went pale, but she rose. She made me repeat it, she said. Her voice shook, then strengthened. Miss Darrowby said that if I described the scar, the corridor, the psalm, and the journey north, no one would question the name. Sir Horace paid my debts. He paid for my lodging and my passage from London. The innkeeper turned the register toward the magistrate. The entry dated the 31st of May remained bound in the volume the initials H.D. beside the sum. A certified copy and the clerk's statement were passed to the magistrate. Mr. Greaves then produced the payment chit dropped by Horace's servant during the attempted Dover removal. The chit remained sealed until its wrapper was opened before the room. Horace's signature appeared at the bottom. A servant exceeded his instructions, Horace said. The toll-house keeper recorded one veiled woman, one attendant, and a hired driver traveling under another name. Lydia replied, Your servant carried the payment. What part of his instructions did he invent? Horace did not answer. Mr. Greaves brought forward 2 separate sealed boxes. He read the custody history of each before breaking the paper joins. Stephen's black enamel mourning ring was placed on the left. Eliza's older ring, with its repaired seam, was placed on the right. Mr. Pelham's authenticated note was read. Stephen's ring had been commissioned in 1815 and engraved within with SS, ES, and the word brother. Eliza's had been commissioned in 1813 by E. Stanhope for E. Wren. It contained no wedding date, no reference to a wife, and no place of marriage. It was a pledge, Eliza said, a real one. Yes, Lydia replied. No one here will call your love imaginary because the marriage was. The kindness in the words broke something in Eliza's composure. She covered her mouth but continued to stand. The sealed packet containing Edward's letter was opened next. The original remained under Mr. Greaves's hand, while he read the relevant passages. Edward admitted that he had spoken of Scotland, but had never taken vows, never made a declaration before witnesses, and never entered a lawful marriage. He confessed that he had allowed Eliza to believe marriage remained possible. He promised an annuity and failed to complete it. When the reading ended, Lady Peverell spoke quickly. Then the woman was never a wife. Lydia is safe. That was all I wished to know. Lydia faced her. You knew before the Pantiles that Mrs. Wren had never stood before a clergyman. Lady Peverell's eyes flickered toward Eliza. Scottish marriages don't always require one. You also knew the man she described bore Edward's scar. I knew only what Sir Horace explained. You knew enough to doubt the claim. Silence answered. Lydia's mother looked around the room and saw no obedient daughter waiting to save her. I believed the scandal would make you return, she said at last. I believed you'd understand that a woman can't remain where her name is unsafe. My name was never safe with people who treated my consent as property. Horace stepped forward. And yet you remain with a man who lied about his rank, removed Mrs. Wren from the Pantiles, and tried to buy her silence. Don't pretend this duke gave you freedom. I don't pretend, Lydia said. Stephen concealed his title. He silenced me in public. He offered money where truth was required. The difference isn't that he was innocent. The difference is that he named what he did, surrendered the evidence, accepted independent custody, and changed his conduct before he knew whether I would stay. Every face turned toward Stephen. He rose, but did not move in front of Lydia. The Duchess has spoken accurately, he said. I hid my title because I wanted to be chosen without it. That desire didn't excuse denying her informed choice. At the Pantiles, I used authority to remove Mrs. Wren after promising Lydia I would listen. Later, I offered money for silence. Those were my acts. Lydia didn't entrap me, pursue my rank, or knowingly enter a disputed marriage. Any disgrace belonging to those choices belongs to me. He looked toward Eliza. House Stanhope also failed you. Edward's annuity will be honored through independent trustees, whether you forgive him or me, and without any condition of silence. The magistrate called Horace, Viola, Eliza, the innkeeper, the toll-house keeper, and the courier in turn to give formal statements. Horace was required to enter into recognizance to appear when summoned. His creditors had already begun separate proceedings after learning how he had used borrowed funds. Viola agreed in writing to retract the claim in every circle where she had repeated it and resigned her county patronage positions before those committees could remove her. Lady Peverell's admission was entered into the record. Her advance from Horace would be repaid from her jointure under solicitor supervision, and Peverell House would be surrendered once the financial settlement was completed. She would remove to Bath, not that afternoon, but when the lawful arrangements were finished. No applause followed. Lydia was grateful. Justice did not need cheering to become real. By late afternoon, the long room had emptied. The rings had been resealed separately. Edward's original letter had returned to neutral custody. The posting register remained upon the innkeeper's desk. Lydia stepped into the quiet yard where the June light lay across the stones. Stephen followed, but stopped several feet away. You didn't speak until I'd finished, she said. I nearly did, but you didn't, because your truth wasn't mine to improve. Lydia opened the small jewel box she had brought from Briarholt. Her wedding ring rested inside. Stephen's breath caught, but he made no movement toward it. I love you, Lydia, he said. I loved the woman who chose a beggar, but I honor the woman who forced a duke to tell the truth. I won't ask you to forget what I did in order to believe me. Lydia took out the ring. I love you, Stephen. I choose you now because nothing essential remains hidden. She slid the band onto her own finger. Only then did she hold out her hand. Stephen took it with both of his touch reverent rather than triumphant. Lydia rose onto her toes and kissed him. The kiss was brief, warm, and entirely hers to begin. When they parted, he rested his forehead lightly against hers. "Home?" he asked. Lydia looked toward the unmarked carriage waiting beyond the arch. "Not yet," she said. "First, tell me whether you own a carriage without a ducal crest." The carriage waiting beyond the bell and crown arch bore no crest. It was plain black, well sprung, and drawn by a matched pair whose quality could not be disguised, but nothing upon its panels announced the Duke of Westmarsh. On the morning of the 21st of June, Lydia entered it beside Stephen and returned to Briarholt without an escort, a cheering crowd, or a line of servants summoned to witness reconciliation. Mrs. Dacre followed in a second carriage, with the sealed copies of the magistrate's record and Lydia's personal effects from the inn, the original rings, Edward's letter, the payment chit, and the statements remained in neutral custody exactly where they had been placed. Lydia did not ask for them to be brought to Briarholt as trophies. Truth did not need to live beneath her roof to remain true. At the estate, Stephen gave no order for bells. He did not lead Lydia into the great hall or present her to the household, as though the public restoration of her name had made the private wound vanish. He only asked, "Would you prefer breakfast in the east morning room or your own apartments?" Lydia looked at the familiar staircase, the portraits, and the broad gallery that had once made her feel small enough to be absorbed by the house. "The morning room," she said, "and I would like you there." They breakfasted across a small table rather than at opposite ends of the long dining room. Stephen poured her tea without sugar. Lydia opened a letter from Mr. Greaves, while he read one from his steward. Neither envelope had been opened by anyone else. That ordinary fact pleased her more deeply than she expected. Eliza had chosen independent lodgings outside Tunbridge Wells and retained her own solicitor. Edward's promised annuity would be settled through trustees who did not answer to Stephen. Eliza had not forgiven House Stanhope, nor had anyone asked her to. Sir Horace's affairs had entered the hands of creditors and solicitors. The false marriage claim and attempted removal had been recorded before the magistrate, and he remained bound to appear when required. Viola's written retractions had begun arriving at the houses where she had repeated the scandal. 2 county charities had accepted her resignation, and a third had removed her before she could offer one. Lady Peverell remained at Peverell House while her jointure, debts, and repayment of Horace's advance were arranged. Lydia received one letter from her mother 3 days after the inquiry. It contained no full apology. It said only that a mother might act wrongly when terrified of losing her child. Lydia answered through Mrs. Dacre. She wrote that fear did not restore consent after taking it away, and that further correspondence would pass through Mrs. Dacre until Lydia chose otherwise. Stephen read neither letter. He did not ask to. In the weeks that followed, Briarholt changed without becoming a storybook reward. Lydia kept her east wing rooms because she liked the morning light and because choosing them had once been an act of self-respect. Stephen kept his apartments beyond the gallery, the doors between their lives opened by invitation. Not assumption. They shared breakfast most mornings. In the afternoon, they worked at 2 writing desks in the same room, one facing the windows and one facing the fire. Stephen answered estate correspondence. Lydia examined household accounts, charitable requests, and invitations addressed to her. rather than accepted in her name. When a letter arrived for either of them, it was placed unopened beside the correct hand. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they did not. The silence no longer felt like punishment. Their first ordinary disagreement came in July, when Stephen proposed visiting 3 outlying farms before travelling to London for the autumn session. He arranged the route, the carriage, the overnight stop, and the servants before mentioning the plan. Lydia listened until he finished. "You have consulted everyone except the person expected to accompany you," she said. Stephen stopped with one hand upon the map. "You are right. I might have wished to go. Do you? That is not the point." "No." He dismissed the arrangements before dinner, then returned the next morning with the map rolled beneath his arm. "Would you like to travel through the western farms in July, Lydia?" "Not all 3. I would like to visit the tenant cottages near Ashcombe first, return home, and decide afterward whether the second journey is necessary. Then that is what we shall do." "You disagree." "I do. You are allowed." A slow smile crossed his face. "This marriage may prove dangerously modern." "No, only dangerously honest." They went to Ashcombe, returned the same evening, and argued mildly over the condition of a bridge, without either of them confusing disagreement with disloyalty. By the 20th of August, nearly 3 months had passed since the wedding. Lady Peverell had removed to Bath after the legal arrangements were completed. Lydia did not attend her departure, but she sent Mrs. Dacre with a letter promising that distance need not become permanent if future affection could exist without command. Peverell House had been surrendered under the settlement. Several long-serving servantsons received wages from the first funds recovered before any family creditor was paid. Eliza's annuity began without a Stanhope visit, a public ceremony, or an expectation of gratitude. Stephen kept that promise too, on the morning they were to leave. For the Kent coast, Lydia entered his dressing room, carrying her reticule, and found him beside an open clothes press. The ragged brown coat from the posting yard lay folded in a cedar chest. Its hem was stained beyond cleaning. One cuff had separated from the sleeve, and the missing button had left a torn opening that no discreet repair could hide. "You kept it," Lydia said. Stephen looked toward the chest. "It was the last garment in which anyone believed I possessed nothing." "You did possess something. A title." "No, a purse that wasn't yours, and the choice to return it." His expression softened. Beside the chest lay a new travelling coat of dark brown superfine. It was well made but plain, without a crest, jewelled pin, or embroidered edge. Lydia opened her reticule and took out the horn button. The thread still clung to one side, faded now from weeks of being carried. Stephen recognized it at once. "Mrs. Dacre returned it to you on the day we arrived, and you kept it." "It was mine until I decided what it meant." She moved closer and lifted the new coat from the chair. "May I alter this?" Stephen glanced at the button in her palm. "Where? Inside the lapel. It will not match the others. No one will see it. That is why it belongs there." He handed her a small sewing case from the dressing table, then stood still while she turned back the lapel. Lydia threaded the needle, secured the old button against the inner cloth, and made several neat stitches. The act was small and domestic, but her hands trembled slightly when she tied the final knot. Stephen watched without reaching for her. "There," she said. "The coat belongs to the Duke. The button belongs to the man who stood in the mud. And which one are you travelling with?" Lydia smoothed the lapel into place. "The man who has learned they cannot be separated when it suits him." Stephen covered the button with his palm, feeling its hidden shape beneath the cloth. "I love you, I know." That sounded dangerously complacent. Lydia smiled. "I love you too." In the carriage court, two vehicles waited. One displayed the Westmarsh crest. The other was the same unmarked carriage that had carried them from the Bell and Crown after the inquiry. Stephen looked from one to the other. "Which do you prefer?" "The plain one." "Because you are ashamed of the title?" "No, because the journey belongs to us before it belongs to anyone who sees us pass." He offered his hand. Lydia placed hers in it and stepped into the carriage. Once the door closed, Briarholt began to recede beyond the glass. The road opened ahead beneath the late summer sky, bending south toward the coast. No crowd watched. No one applauded. Lydia laid her hand against the inside of Stephen's lapel, feeling the old horn button hidden beneath the new cloth. He looked down, then waited. She drew him closer by the coat and kissed him before he could ask. His hand came gently over hers, warm against the button, while the unmarked carriage carried them forward along the open road.